They say death is the end, but what if I told you it was just the beginning? What if I told you that sometimes, the universe gives you a second chance to right the wrongs that destroyed your soul? My name is Sage Lin, and this is the story of how I died at 25, broken and betrayed by the man I loved most in this world, only to wake up 3 years earlier with all my memories intact and a burning need for justice. But what I didn't know then was that revenge would taste sweeter than I ever imagined, and the very gift that killed me would become the weapon that would destroy them all. It was my 22nd birthday when everything began to unravel the first time. I remember sitting in my penthouse apartment, surrounded by luxury that my family's business empire had built over 3 generations. The Lin Corporation wasn't just successful, we were untouchable. My father had worked himself to death building something that would last forever, and when he passed, he left me everything. At 22, I was the youngest female CEO in the city's history, controlling assets worth hundreds of millions. I had everything a woman could want: beauty that turned heads on the street, intelligence that commanded boardrooms, and a fortune that could buy anything my heart desired. But there was only one thing I truly wanted, and that was Levi Pei's love. Levi was everything I thought I needed in a man. Tall, with those piercing dark eyes that seemed to see straight through to my soul, and a smile that could melt ice. He worked as a mid-level manager at a tech company, nothing special, but I didn't care about money when it came to love. I had enough for both of us. What I loved most about Levi was how he treated me like I was just Sage, not the Lin Corporation heiress. He never asked for expensive gifts or fancy dinners. He seemed content with simple dates, walking in the park, cooking dinner together in his modest apartment. Looking back now, I realize I mistook his indifference for humility, his distance for mystery. I was so desperate to be loved for who I was, not what I had, that I ignored every red flag waving right in front of my face. On that birthday morning 3 years ago, Levi arrived at my apartment carrying a small velvet box. His eyes were shining with what I thought was excitement, but now I recognize as something much darker: anticipation. He seemed nervous, fidgeting with the box, and my heart raced thinking this might be a proposal. We'd been together for 2 years, and I was ready to spend my life with him. I was ready to share everything I had, to build a future together, to trust him with not just my heart but my entire world. "Sage," he said, his voice soft and tender in that way that always made my knees weak, "I have something special for you. Something that shows how much you mean to me." He opened the box slowly, revealing a silver bracelet unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was beautiful in an otherworldly way, with intricate engravings that seemed to shift and move in the light. The metal had an unusual warmth to it, and embedded throughout were small stones that caught the light like trapped stars. It was the most beautiful piece of jewelry I'd ever seen, and also the most unsettling. Something about it made my skin crawl, but I pushed that feeling down. This was a gift from the man I loved, a symbol of his commitment to me. "It's an antique," Levi explained, taking my wrist gently in his hands. "I found it at this little shop downtown. The moment I saw it, I knew it belonged to you. The shopkeeper said it has a long history, that it brings good fortune to its wearer." His fingers were warm as they fastened the clasp, and I felt a strange tingling sensation run up my arm. For just a moment, the room seemed to spin, and I could have sworn I heard something like whispers in a language I didn't understand. But then Levi kissed me softly, and I forgot about everything except how much I loved him. "Thank you," I whispered against his lips. "It's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me." And I meant it. Not because of the bracelet itself, but because I thought it represented his love for me, his commitment to our future together. I wore it constantly from that day forward, never taking it off, even in the shower or when I slept. It became part of me, and I became part of it. But what I didn't know then was that this beautiful gift was actually a curse designed to slowly drain away everything I held dear, and the man I trusted with my life was already planning my destruction. The changes started small, so subtle I barely noticed them at first. Within a week of putting on the bracelet, I began having trouble sleeping. Dark dreams plagued my nights, visions of shadows reaching for me, whispers telling me I was worthless, images of everyone I loved turning away in disgust. I'd wake up exhausted, and coffee couldn't shake the bone-deep weariness that settled into my body. I started making mistakes at work, small ones at first. Forgetting important meetings, signing documents without reading them carefully, trusting people I should have questioned. My assistant, who had worked with my father for 15 years, pulled me aside one day with concern in her eyes. "Miss Lynn," she said carefully, "you haven't seemed yourself lately. Is everything all right?" I brushed off her concerns, telling her I was just adjusting to new responsibilities, but privately, I was worried too. I felt like I was losing my edge, like my mind was wrapped in cotton. Simple decisions that used to take me minutes now left me paralyzed for hours. I'd stare at contracts until the words blurred together, my thoughts scattered and unfocused. Meanwhile, something incredible was happening to Levi. His entire life seemed to be transforming before my eyes. Within a month of giving me the bracelet, he got a massive promotion at work, moving from middle management to vice president practically overnight. His salary tripled, then tripled again when he was headhunted by a larger company. He started working out, his body becoming lean and muscular when he'd never shown interest in fitness before. His skin cleared up, his hair grew thick and lustrous, and even his posture changed. He carried himself with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Everyone who met him was instantly charmed. Business deals fell into his lap, investment opportunities appeared out of nowhere, and suddenly this man who had never shown any ambition was building his own empire. But it wasn't just Levi who was changing. His mother, who had been struggling with chronic health issues for years, suddenly experienced a miraculous recovery. The arthritis that had kept her bedridden vanished overnight. She looked 20 years younger, her gray hair returning to its original black, her wrinkles smoothing away like they'd never existed. His sister, who had always been pretty but unremarkable, became so beautiful that modeling agencies started approaching her on the street. Their entire family seemed to be blessed with extraordinary luck, health, and success, while I continued to decline. By the 6-month mark, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. My once glowing skin had become pale and drawn, dark circles shadowing my eyes no matter how much concealer I used. My thick, lustrous hair began falling out in clumps, and I had to cut it shorter and shorter to hide the thinning. I'd lost so much weight that my clothes hung loose on my frame, but not in a healthy way. I looked gaunt, almost skeletal. More alarming than the physical changes were the mental ones. My sharp business instincts, the intelligence my father had been so proud of, seemed to be slipping away day by day. I made increasingly poor decisions, trusted the wrong people, and watched helplessly as my company's stock price began to plummet. During this time, my best friend Luna Chen became my constant companion and support system. Luna had been in my life since college, one of those friendships that develops slowly but runs deep. She was everything I wasn't, quiet where I was outgoing, thoughtful where I was impulsive, steady where I was passionate. While I threw myself into building my business empire, Luna had chosen a simpler path, working as a freelance translator and living modestly in a small apartment across town. I'd always admired her contentment, her ability to find joy in simple things, and during my darkest months, she was the only person who seemed to understand what I was going through. "You're pushing yourself too hard," Luna would say, bringing me herbal tea when I worked late into the night. "Maybe you should take a vacation, get away from all this stress." She'd listen patiently as I vented about my health problems, my work troubles, and my growing anxiety about my relationship with Levi. She never judged, never offered solutions I didn't ask for, just provided a shoulder to cry on and a safe space to express my fears. What I couldn't see then, blinded as I was by grief and confusion, was how Luna's eyes would light up whenever I described my losses, how she'd lean forward eagerly when I talked about my latest business failure or health scare. I didn't notice how she always seemed to be around whenever something went wrong, ready with comfort and advice that somehow never actually helped. I was so grateful to have someone who cared about me during my darkest hour that I ignored the voice in my head warning me that something wasn't right about her sudden devotion to our friendship. But the truth was already unraveling around me, and I was too weak to see the threads. The end came exactly 3 years after Levi gave me the bracelet. By then, I was a shadow of my former self, financially ruined, physically ill, and mentally exhausted. The Ling Corporation had collapsed under the weight of my poor decisions and the economic attacks I was too depleted to defend against. Competitors had moved in like vultures, picking apart everything my family had built. I'd sold my penthouse, my cars, even most of my jewelry just to pay the debts that kept mounting. I was living in a small apartment, the kind of place I'd never imagined I'd end up, surviving on what little remained of my personal savings. That night, I was lying on my bed, staring at the ceiling and wondering how everything had gone so wrong, when I heard voices coming from the apartment next door. The walls were thin, and I'd grown used to hearing my neighbors' conversations, but this time I recognized the voices. It was Levi, but he wasn't alone. A woman was with him, and they were talking about me. "She's almost gone," the woman said, and I froze when I realized it was Luna's voice. "The bracelet has drained nearly everything from her. Just a little longer, and she'll be completely used up." My blood turned to ice in my veins. Luna was here, in the apartment next to mine, talking to Levi about a bracelet, the bracelet he'd given me 3 years ago. "Good," Levi replied, and his voice was cold, calculating, nothing like the warm tone he'd always used with me. I was getting tired of pretending to care about her. 3 years of playing the loving boyfriend has been exhausting. At least it's almost over. I pressed my ear to the wall, my heart hammering so hard I was afraid they'd hear it. "You've done well," Luna continued. "Your mother and sister are completely transformed, and your own success exceeds even what we hoped for. The ancient magic in that bracelet is more powerful than the legends claimed." "Ancient magic?" I thought wildly. What were they talking about? "And what about your part of the bargain?" Levi asked. "You've been patient, but I know you want your reward." Luna laughed, a sound I'd heard 1,000 times during our friendship, but now it sent chills down my spine. "Oh, I've been enjoying my reward all along. Do you know how satisfying it's been, watching perfect little Sage Lin lose everything while I played the concerned friend? She trusts me completely. She tells me her every fear, every weakness, every secret shame. I've been feeding information about her business dealings to your competitors for months, helping them target her most vulnerable investments. The best part is how grateful she is for my support. She actually thanks me for being there while I destroy her life piece by piece." The world tilted around me. Luna, my best friend, my confidant, the person I'd trusted with my deepest fears and most private thoughts, had been working with Levi all along. Every piece of advice she'd given me, every shoulder she'd offered to cry on, every moment of comfort she'd provided had been part of an elaborate plan to destroy me. The betrayal cut so deep I could barely breathe. "She's been wearing the bracelet for 3 years now," Levi continued. "The transfer should be complete. All her wealth, health, beauty, and intelligence have been drained away and redistributed to us and my family. She should die soon, and then we can finally be together without having to pretend anymore." That's when I understood the full scope of their plan. The bracelet wasn't just cursed, it was designed to transfer everything good in my life to Levi and his family, while Luna helped orchestrate my downfall from the inside. They had planned this from the very beginning, maybe even before Levi and I started dating. I had been marked for destruction, chosen specifically because I had so much to lose. I stumbled away from the wall, my legs barely supporting my weight. The bracelet on my wrist, which I had worn with such love and pride, now felt like a shackle made of ice and poison. I tried to remove it, clawing at the clasp with my fingernails until they bled, but it wouldn't budge. The silver had somehow fused with my skin, becoming part of me, and the more I struggled against it, the more it seemed to tighten. That night, I confronted them. I waited until I heard Luna leave, then used my spare key to enter Levi's apartment. He was sitting on his couch, looking through my financial documents, I realized with a sick feeling. Records of my company's collapse, my personal bankruptcy, my complete financial ruin, and he was studying them like a scientist examining the results of a successful experiment. Enjoying your bedtime reading? I asked, and he looked up with surprise that quickly turned to annoyance. Sage, what are you doing here? It's late, and you look terrible. You should be resting. Even now, even when I knew the truth, he was still playing the concerned boyfriend role. I heard you, I said simply. I heard everything. You and Luna, talking about the bracelet, about the ancient magic, about how you've been destroying my life for 3 years. His expression didn't change for a long moment, and then something shifted in his eyes. The mask of love and concern fell away, revealing the cold, calculating monster underneath. Well, he said, setting down the papers and standing up slowly, I guess there's no point in pretending anymore. His voice was different now, harder, crueler, with an edge that made my skin crawl. You were always too smart for your own good, Sage. Even weakened by the curse, you figured it out eventually. Why? I whispered, though I wasn't sure I really wanted to know the answer. Why did you do this to me? I loved you. I would have given you anything you asked for. Levi laughed, and the sound was like broken glass. That's exactly why we chose you. You were so desperate to be loved for who you were instead of what you had that you never questioned my motives. You made it so easy, Sage. All I had to do was pretend to care about your personality, your thoughts, your feelings, and you handed over your entire life without a second thought. And Luna? I asked, though I already knew the answer would destroy what was left of my heart. Luna has hated you since college, he said casually, like he was discussing the weather. Did you really think someone like her could be friends with someone like you without an ulterior motive? You had everything, money, beauty, success, confidence, and she had nothing. She spent years watching you succeed while she struggled, building up resentment and rage until she was ready to do anything to see you fall. When she came to me with this plan, when she told me about the cursed bracelet her grandmother had left her, I knew it was perfect revenge. The room was spinning around me, but I forced myself to keep standing, to keep listening. I needed to understand the full scope of their betrayal. Luna's been working with your business competitors for over a year, feeding them inside information about your deals, your strategies, your weaknesses. Every time you confided in her about your troubles, she was already planning how to make them worse. Every piece of comfort she offered was designed to keep you vulnerable and trusting while we destroyed you systematically. I felt something break inside me, some last fragile piece of hope or faith in humanity that I hadn't realized I was still clinging to. So everything was a lie. Our entire relationship, Luna's friendship, all of it. All of it, he confirmed with a smile that made me want to vomit. But you have to admit, it worked perfectly. Look at you now, Sage. 3 years ago, you were one of the most powerful women in the city. Now you're a broken-down shell of a person living in a slum apartment, dying slowly while we grow stronger every day. The curse has taken everything from you and given it to us. Your wealth built my business empire. Your health restored my mother's body. Your beauty transformed my sister into a supermodel. Your intelligence guides my every business decision. You've given us everything, and soon you'll give us the last thing we need, your death. That's when I knew he was going to kill me. Maybe the curse would have done it eventually, but Levi couldn't wait that long. He needed me gone completely, needed to be sure I could never find a way to reverse what they'd done or expose their crimes. I saw it in his eyes before he moved, saw the decision crystallize into action, but I was too weak to run, too drained to fight. He didn't use a weapon. He just put his hands around my throat and squeezed, looking into my eyes while he killed me with the same hands that had once touched me with what I thought was love. The bracelet grew burning hot against my wrist as my life ebbed away, as though it was absorbing those final moments of my existence. The last thing I remember was his face above me, not twisted with rage or passion, but calm and businesslike, like he was completing a mundane task. But death wasn't the end for me. Death was awakening. I opened my eyes in my penthouse apartment, in my own bed, surrounded by the luxury I'd lost years ago. My hands flew to my throat, expecting to find bruises, but my skin was smooth and unmarked. I stumbled to the bathroom mirror and gasped at my reflection. I looked exactly as I had 3 years ago, healthy, beautiful, vibrant, alive. My hair was thick and lustrous, my skin glowed with youth and vitality, and my eyes were bright with intelligence. But most importantly, my wrist was bare. There was no silver bracelet, no cursed jewelry draining my life away. For a moment, I wondered if the entire nightmare had been a dream, some kind of elaborate fantasy brought on by stress or illness. But then I looked at the calendar on my nightstand, and my blood ran cold. It was my 22nd birthday, the exact day, 3 years in the past, when Levi had given me the cursed bracelet that destroyed my life. Somehow, impossibly, I had been given a second chance. Whether it was magic, divine intervention, or some cosmic correction of an injustice, I didn't know and didn't care. What mattered was that I remembered everything. Every moment of betrayal, every lie they'd told, every piece of my life they'd stolen. I knew exactly what Levi and Luna were planning, and this time, I was going to be ready for them. The knowledge of what was coming should have terrified me, but instead, I felt a cold calm settling over my mind. I had experienced the worst betrayal imaginable, had lost everything I cared about, had died at the hands of the man I loved. There was nothing they could do to me now that could compare to what I'd already survived. This time, I held all the cards. This time, I was going to destroy them before they could destroy me. But I wasn't going to simply avoid the curse or expose their plans. That would be too merciful, too clean. They had spent 3 years systematically dismantling my life piece by piece, savoring every moment of my suffering. Now it was my turn to return the favor, to show them what real betrayal felt like, to make them understand that some sins come with a price that can never be fully paid. I spent the morning preparing for what was to come, reviewing everything I knew about their plan and looking for weaknesses I could exploit. The cursed bracelet was the centerpiece of their scheme, the tool that would drain my life force and transfer it to Levi's family. But what if the bracelet found a different target? What if the curse that was meant to destroy me ended up destroying them instead? The idea formed slowly, but once it took root, I couldn't shake it. I knew exactly what I needed to do, but it would require perfect timing, flawless acting, and a willingness to sacrifice someone innocent to achieve my revenge. The thought should have troubled me more than it did, but 3 years of betrayal and a brutal death had burned away most of my capacity for mercy. When Levi arrived that afternoon, carrying the same velvet box I remembered so well, I was ready for him. I greeted him with the same joy and excitement I'd shown the first time, playing the role of the loving, trusting girlfriend while inside, my heart was ice. He went through the same script, the same tender words about finding something special that belonged to me, the same lies about good fortune and ancient history. It's beautiful, I breathed, just as I had before, watching his eyes shine with that anticipation I now recognized as hunger. He was already savoring his victory, already imagining how my life force would feed his ambitions and transform his family. But this time, when he reached for my wrist, I pulled back with a sudden inspiration. "Wait," I said, and I saw a flicker of concern cross his face. "I just remembered, my sister is coming to visit this afternoon for my birthday. She's been so depressed lately, stuck in that wheelchair, feeling like her life is over. Maybe I could let her wear it first? Just for a few hours, to cheer her up. She never gets pretty things anymore." I looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes, playing the part of a caring sister who just wanted to share her good fortune. For a moment, I saw calculation behind his expression as he weighed the risks of delaying his plan. But then greed won out over caution. "Of course," he said smoothly. "That's such a thoughtful idea, Sage. Your sister deserves to feel beautiful too." He had no idea he was about to hand me the perfect weapon for his own destruction. My sister Emma arrived an hour later, wheeling herself into my apartment with the same quiet resignation that had characterized her ever since the car accident that paralyzed her legs 2 years earlier. Emma was 4 years younger than me, and before the accident, she'd been the bright, energetic one in our family. She was studying to be a doctor, volunteering at animal shelters, dating a sweet boy who adored her, living the kind of full, passionate life that made everyone around her feel more alive just by association. The accident had stolen all of that from her, leaving her bitter and withdrawn, struggling with depression and rage at the unfairness of her situation. I felt a stab of guilt as I looked at her, knowing what I was about to do, but I pushed it away. Emma wasn't innocent in all of this. She had always resented my success, my health, my freedom to live the life she'd lost. More than once, she'd made cutting remarks about my wealth, my business accomplishments, my apparently perfect existence. She'd never said it directly, but I could see in her eyes that she blamed me for having everything while she had nothing. In some twisted way, what I was about to do to her was simply giving her what she'd always wanted, a chance to take my place, to experience the life she thought I didn't deserve. "Emma," I said warmly, embracing her carefully. "I'm so glad you're here. I have something special to show you." I led her to the couch where Levi was waiting with the velvet box, and I saw her eyes light up with curiosity. Despite her depression, Emma had always loved beautiful things, and the bracelet was undeniably gorgeous. "Levi gave this to me for my birthday," I explained, opening the box to reveal the cursed jewelry. "Isn't it incredible? But I thought you should be the first one to wear it. You never get to dress up anymore, and I want you to feel beautiful today." I was amazed by how easily the lies came, how naturally I could manipulate her emotions and Levi's expectations. Emma's eyes filled with tears, whether from gratitude or envy, I couldn't tell, and she held out her wrist without hesitation. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," she whispered, and I felt Levi's tension as he watched me fasten the clasp around her thin wrist instead of my own. The moment the bracelet touched her skin, I saw the change begin. Emma gasped softly, her eyes widening as though she'd been struck by lightning. The silver seemed to pulse against her pale skin, and for just an instant, I could swear I saw something move beneath the surface of the metal. Then the moment passed, and Emma was smiling more brightly than I'd seen in years. "I feel different," she said wonderingly, flexing her fingers and rotating her wrist to catch the light on the bracelet's surface. "Lighter, somehow. Like something heavy has been lifted off my shoulders." I exchanged a meaningful look with Levi, who was watching the scene with barely concealed satisfaction. He thought everything was going according to plan, that the curse would simply drain Emma for a few hours before moving to its intended target. What none of us realized was that ancient curses don't distinguish between targets the way modern people might hope. The bracelet had been created to feed on life force, wealth, health, and happiness, and it didn't particularly care whose life it consumed. Emma might not have been the original intended victim, but she was wearing the cursed jewelry now, and the magic was already beginning its work. Over the following days, I watched with a mixture of fascination and horror as the curse began to affect my sister and, through the mystical connection the bracelet had established, Levi's family. Emma's depression seemed to lift almost overnight. She started speaking more, smiling more, even laughing at jokes on television. But at the same time, I noticed that Levi looked increasingly tired and stressed. His mother called to complain about mysterious aches and pains that had suddenly appeared, and his sister mentioned that her skin was breaking out for the first time in years. The curse was working, but not in the way any of us had expected. Instead of transferring Emma's limited life force to Levi's family, it was doing the opposite, draining their accumulated power and channeling it into my sister. All the wealth, health, and success they had stolen from me during those 3 years was being redistributed once again, but this time Emma was the beneficiary. Within a week, the changes were dramatic enough that even Emma noticed something was wrong, or rather, something was incredibly right. She woke up one morning and discovered that she could feel sensation in her legs for the first time since the accident. By the end of that day, she was able to wiggle her toes. By the end of the week, she was taking her first tentative steps with the aid of a walker. The doctors were calling it a miracle, a spontaneous neurological recovery that defied medical explanation. But Emma's miraculous healing was only the beginning. She started receiving mysterious job offers, opportunities that seemed to fall from the sky. Publishers wanted to buy the memoir she'd been writing about her recovery. Investors approached her with business propositions. Modeling agencies called, amazed by photos they'd seen of her newfound beauty and vitality. It was as though the universe itself was conspiring to shower her with every blessing imaginable. Meanwhile, Levi's world was falling apart exactly as mine had 3 years earlier. His business deals started failing for inexplicable reasons. His health began to deteriorate, not dramatically, but in small, frustrating ways that sapped his energy and confidence. His mother's mysterious illness returned with a vengeance, and his sister's modeling career crashed as her looks faded almost overnight. Everything they had gained through my suffering was being stripped away and given to Emma, who had no idea she was the beneficiary of an ancient curse. The irony was exquisite. Levi had thought he was so clever, using the cursed bracelet to steal my life and give it to his family. Now he was experiencing firsthand what it felt like to be on the other side of that equation, watching helplessly as everything he'd worked for disappeared into someone else's hands. And the most beautiful part was that he couldn't remove the bracelet from Emma without revealing his entire scheme. He was trapped by his own deception, forced to smile and pretend to be happy about my sister's recovery while internally screaming at his losses. But I wasn't content to simply watch the curse do its work. I had 3 years of anger and betrayal to repay, and I intended to be much more hands-on with my revenge than they had been with my destruction. While the bracelets slowly drained their stolen power, I used my restored intelligence and business acumen to systematically dismantle everything they had built. I started with Luna Chen, my former best friend and secret enemy. Since I knew she was planning to feed information about my business dealings to competitors, I decided to give her exactly what she wanted, false information that would lead to her own downfall. I began confiding in her about fake business ventures, fictional deals, and non-existent weaknesses in my company's structure. Luna eagerly passed this misinformation along to the people who were paying her for inside knowledge, not realizing that I was using her to spread lies that would damage her credibility and reputation. Within a month, Luna's contacts had realized they were receiving false intelligence. When their attacks on my business failed because the vulnerabilities she'd reported didn't actually exist, they began to suspect that Luna was either incompetent or actively working against them. Her reputation as a reliable source of information crumbled, and the steady stream of money she'd been receiving for her betrayal dried up completely. But destroying her credibility wasn't enough. I wanted Luna to experience the same kind of personal devastation that she and Levi had inflicted on me. So I began to investigate her background more thoroughly, looking for secrets I could exploit and weaknesses I could attack. What I discovered was even better than I'd hoped. Luna's father was the chief financial officer of a major corporation, and he'd been embezzling money for years to fund his gambling addiction. Luna knew about his crimes and had been helping him cover them up, using her skills as a translator to create false documents and forge signatures on financial reports. She thought she was protecting her family, but she was actually making herself an accessory to fraud on a massive scale. I could have exposed them immediately, but that would have been too quick, too merciful. Instead, I decided to let them dig their own graves deeper while I prepared for maximum impact. I hired a private investigator to document every aspect of their criminal enterprise, building an airtight case that would destroy both their reputations and their freedom. Then I waited for the perfect moment to strike. That moment came 2 months later, during Luna's father's company's annual shareholders meeting. I had purchased enough stock to attend the meeting as an investor, and I used the public forum to present evidence of the embezzlement scheme to the board of directors and the assembled shareholders. The documentation was so thorough and damning that there was no possibility of denial or cover-up. Luna's father was fired immediately and arrested within hours. The scandal made headlines in the business section of every major newspaper, destroying his career and reputation permanently. Luna, as his accomplice, was also investigated and eventually charged with fraud and forgery. The trial lasted 6 months, during which her life became a public nightmare of media attention and legal scrutiny. But the most satisfying part of Luna's downfall was watching how it affected her relationship with Levi. As the curse continued to drain his family's stolen power and channel it into Emma, Levi became increasingly desperate and paranoid. He began to suspect that Luna's arrest was somehow connected to their plot against me, that maybe I had discovered their scheme and was striking back. He started avoiding her calls, distancing himself from their relationship, and eventually abandoned her completely when the legal pressure became too intense. Luna, who had sacrificed her integrity and her friendship with me for the promise of a future with Levi, found herself alone and facing prison time while the man she'd betrayed her best friend for pretended he'd never known her. The poetic justice was almost too perfect to believe. While Luna's world crumbled, I turned my attention to Levi himself. The curse was doing its work, his health, wealth, and success were all declining as Emma's fortunes rose, but I wanted to speed up the process and add some personal touches that would make his suffering more exquisite. I started by targeting his business empire, the success he'd built using my stolen intelligence and resources. Since I knew every deal he was planning, every strategy he intended to employ, and every weakness in his operations, it was relatively easy to outmaneuver him at every turn. I used my restored wealth and connections to systematically destroy his opportunities, stealing clients, blocking partnerships, and undermining his reputation in the business community. Every victory that should have been his became mine instead. Deals he'd spent months negotiating fell apart at the last minute when better offers appeared from my company. Investors he'd courted decided to fund my projects instead. The media that had once celebrated his meteoric rise began writing articles questioning his business practices and his ability to sustain his success. The psychological pressure was enormous, and I could see it taking a toll on him. He began making increasingly desperate decisions, taking bigger risks and trusting the wrong people in his attempts to regain his footing. But every gamble failed, every risk backfired, and every new venture collapsed before it could generate the returns he needed. The final blow came when I arranged for the truth about his relationship with Luna to be exposed. I leaked evidence of their conspiracy to destroy me, including recorded conversations I'd obtained through careful planning and technological surveillance. The recordings revealed not only their plot to use the cursed bracelet against me, but also Levi's callous attitude toward my suffering and Luna's gleeful participation in my downfall. The scandal destroyed what remained of Levi's reputation and credibility. Business partners distanced themselves from him, investors withdrew their support, and clients terminated their contracts. The empire he'd built using my stolen life force collapsed in a matter of weeks, leaving him financially ruined and professionally disgraced. But the physical and mental effects of the curse were even more devastating than the financial ones. As Emma continued to thrive and recover, absorbing more of the power that had been stolen from me, Levi and his family began to experience the same kind of systematic decline I'd suffered 3 years earlier. His mother's health deteriorated rapidly, aging her 20 years in a matter of months. His sister's beauty faded as quickly as it had appeared, leaving her struggling with the same insecurities and limitations she'd had before the curse transformed her. And Levi himself became a shadow of the confident, successful man he'd been just months earlier. The most satisfying part was watching him realize what was happening. I could see the moment when understanding dawned in his eyes, when he connected Emma's miraculous recovery to his family's decline and understood that somehow, impossibly, I had turned his own weapon against him. The look of horror and disbelief on his face was worth every moment of suffering I'd endured in my previous life. He came to me one night, desperate and broken, begging me to remove the bracelet from Emma. He confessed everything: the curse, the conspiracy with Luna, the years of systematic betrayal that had led to my death. He threw himself at my feet, sobbing and pleading for mercy, promising to return everything he'd stolen if I would only spare his family. "Please, Sage," he whispered, his voice cracking with desperation. "I know what we did was wrong. I know we hurt you terribly. But my mother is dying, my sister is losing her mind, and I can feel myself getting weaker every day. The curse is killing us just like it killed you. Please, I'm begging you, show us the mercy we never showed you." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered the coldness in his eyes as he strangled me, the satisfaction in his voice as he described how my suffering had enriched his family, the 3 years of agony I'd endured while he and Luna celebrated my destruction. "The bracelet can't be removed," I told him calmly, which was technically true. "Once it bonds with someone's life force, it becomes part of them. Emma will wear it until the day she dies, just as I wore it until you killed me." His face went white with horror, and I felt a deep satisfaction at his despair. "But there might be another way," I continued, watching hope flicker in his eyes. "The curse feeds on life force, wealth, health, and happiness. If you could find someone else to absorb the drain, someone with more to lose than your family has left, the bracelet might shift its focus to a new target." It was a lie, of course. The bracelet had chosen Emma as its new host, and nothing could change that now. But I wanted to see how far Levi would go to save himself, how many lines he would cross, how many innocents he would sacrifice for his own survival. Over the following weeks, I watched with dark amusement as Levi grew increasingly desperate in his attempts to transfer the curse to someone else. He tried to convince wealthy friends to wear replica bracelets, hoping to trick the magic into accepting a substitute. He approached strangers on the street, offering them money to put on jewelry he claimed was lucky. He even attempted to force the bracelet onto unwilling victims, though his weakened state made him easy to overpower. All of his efforts failed, of course, because the curse wasn't transferable in the way he imagined. But his increasingly erratic behavior brought him to the attention of the police, who began investigating reports of a man attempting to assault people with cursed jewelry. The investigation led them to uncover evidence of his other crimes: the fraud, the conspiracy, the systematic destruction of my life that had culminated in murder. The legal case against Levi was even more devastating than what had happened to Luna. The evidence was overwhelming, the victims were numerous, and the media coverage was relentless. Every detail of his crimes was dissected in public, every aspect of his character was examined and found wanting, every lie he'd told was exposed to the harsh light of scrutiny. But the curse didn't wait for the legal system to deliver justice. As the weeks passed, Levi's decline accelerated beyond anything I'd experienced in my previous life. The bracelet seemed to be draining him at an exponential rate, as though it was making up for lost time. His hair fell out in clumps, his skin became gray and papery, and his once powerful body withered away to nothing. His mental state deteriorated even faster than his physical condition. He became paranoid, convinced that everyone was conspiring against him, that the curse was spreading to anyone who came into contact with him. He stopped leaving his apartment, stopped eating regular meals, stopped maintaining any semblance of normal human behavior. He would spend hours staring at his reflection in the mirror, watching his face change, feeling his strength ebb away day by day. The end came exactly 1 year after Emma had put on the bracelet. I found Levi in his apartment, collapsed on the floor beside his bed, his body nothing more than skin stretched over bone. His eyes were still open, still aware, and when he saw me, he tried to speak. But no sound came out, the curse had taken even his voice. I knelt beside him, close enough that he could hear me whisper. "You asked me once why we chose you," I said softly. "The truth is, the universe chose you. It chose you to be the instrument of your own destruction, to teach you what it feels like to be betrayed by someone you trust, to show you that every curse eventually comes home to roost." His eyes filled with tears, the last moisture his dehydrated body could produce, and I saw in them a recognition of the justice in his fate. He had lived long enough to understand that his suffering was not arbitrary or cruel, but earned through his own choices, his own willingness to sacrifice innocent lives for personal gain. He died as the sun set, his last breath escaping in a whisper that might have been an apology or might have been nothing more than the final release of air from his lungs. I felt no sadness at his passing, no sense of loss or regret. He had been a cancer in my life, a source of pain and betrayal that had ultimately led to my death. His own death was simply the closing of a circle, the completion of a story that had begun with his greed and ended with his destruction. In the months that followed, I watched Emma bloom into the woman she was meant to be. The curse had given her everything Levi and his family had stolen from me: health, wealth, beauty, intelligence, and opportunities beyond her wildest dreams. She used these gifts wisely, building a business empire that rivaled what my family had created, using her platform to help other disabled individuals find hope and purpose in their lives. She never knew the true source of her miraculous recovery, never suspected that her transformation had come at the cost of other people's lives. I saw no reason to burden her with that knowledge. She had suffered enough in her own way, had endured her own share of pain and loss. If the universe had chosen to redistribute the stolen blessings to her, who was I to question that cosmic justice? But the most satisfying part of my revenge wasn't watching my enemies fall or seeing Emma rise. It was the knowledge that I had survived the worst betrayal imaginable and emerged stronger, smarter, and more determined than ever before. I had looked death in the face and refused to stay down. I had taken the weapons that were meant to destroy me and turned them against my destroyers. As I stand here now, 3 years after my rebirth, I sometimes wonder if there are others out there like me, people who have been betrayed so completely that the universe itself intervened to give them a second chance. I wonder if there are other cursed bracelets, other ancient magics, other opportunities for cosmic justice in a world that often seems unfair. Recently, I met a young woman who reminded me of myself at 22, beautiful, successful, trusting, and completely blind to the dangers that surrounded her. She was dating a man who seemed too good to be true, who loved her despite her wealth rather than because of it. She had a best friend who was always there to comfort her during difficult times, who listened to her problems with such understanding and sympathy. I saw the signs immediately, the subtle manipulation, the careful positioning, the patient building of trust that would eventually be weaponized against her. I recognized the predators circling their prey, preparing to destroy an innocent life for their own benefit. For a moment, I considered walking away. It wasn't my problem, after all. I had my own life to live, my own happiness to protect. But then I remembered how it felt to die alone and betrayed, how it felt to realize that the people I trusted most had been planning my destruction from the very beginning. I couldn't let that happen to someone else. I couldn't stand by and watch another young woman be destroyed by the same kind of greed and jealousy that had nearly ended my own story. So I introduced myself to her, carefully and naturally, building a friendship based on genuine care rather than hidden agendas. I began to share my own experiences, not the supernatural parts, but the human elements of betrayal and recovery that she needed to hear. I helped her see the warning signs she was missing, the red flags she was ignoring, the dangers that lurked behind familiar faces. It took months of patient work, but eventually, she began to understand. She started questioning her boyfriend's motives, investigating her best friend's background, protecting herself from the people who intended to harm her. When they finally revealed their true nature, she was ready for them. When they tried to destroy her, she destroyed them instead. She never knew how close she had come to experiencing the same fate I had suffered. She never realized that a stranger's intervention had saved her life. But she didn't need to know the details to appreciate the outcome. She was free, safe, and strong enough to build the life she deserved. And that, I realized, was the true purpose of my second chance. Not just to get revenge on the people who had wronged me, but to use the wisdom I'd gained through suffering to protect others from similar fates. The universe had given me knowledge and power, and with them came the responsibility to use those gifts in service of justice. Some people might call what I did to Levi and Luna cruel or excessive. They might argue that no crime deserves such complete and systematic punishment. But those people have never experienced the specific kind of betrayal that comes from someone you love, someone you trust completely, systematically destroying your life while pretending to care about your well-being. They have never felt the particular agony of realizing that every moment of intimacy was a lie, every expression of love was manipulation, every gesture of support was actually sabotage. They have never died at the hands of someone they would have given their life to protect. If they had experienced those things, they would understand that some betrayals are so complete, so devastating, that they require equally complete justice to balance the scales. They would understand that mercy is a luxury that can only be afforded when the crime is forgivable, and some crimes transcend forgiveness entirely. But for those who have suffered as I suffered, who have been betrayed as I was betrayed, who have died as I died, for them, I offer hope. The universe is stranger and more just than we often believe. Sometimes, when the scales are tipped too far toward evil, something intervenes to restore the balance. Sometimes, the dead get to rise again and claim the justice they were denied in life. And sometimes, just sometimes, the cursed bracelet finds its way to exactly the right wrist, at exactly the right moment, to deliver exactly the justice that was always meant to be served. My name is Sage Lin, and this is my story of death, rebirth, and the sweet taste of perfectly balanced revenge. I died at 25, betrayed and broken by the people I loved most. But I was reborn with knowledge, power, and an unshakable determination to ensure that no one else would suffer the same fate. The bracelet still rests on Emma's wrist, gleaming silver in the sunlight, continuing to channel blessings and opportunities into her life. She wears it every day, never knowing its true nature, never suspecting that her miraculous transformation came at such a terrible cost. But that's as it should be. Some knowledge is too dark for innocent souls to carry. As for me, I've learned that revenge, while satisfying, is not the same as healing. True healing comes from using your pain to prevent others from experiencing the same suffering, from turning your worst experiences into wisdom that can guide and protect those who come after you. I still miss the person I was before all of this began, the trusting, optimistic young woman who believed the best of everyone she met. But I don't regret becoming who I am now. I'm stronger, wiser, and more capable of protecting myself and others from the predators who walk among us wearing masks of love and friendship. The cursed bracelet taught me that every gift comes with a price, every blessing carries a curse, and every act of betrayal plants the seeds of its own destruction. But it also taught me that sometimes, the universe itself reaches down to ensure that justice is served, that the innocent are protected, and that those who prey on others eventually face the consequences of their choices. And in a world where betrayal often goes unpunished and evil frequently prospers, that knowledge is perhaps the greatest gift of all.